Welcome to episode 8 of the Female Guides Requested podcast. I'm your host, Ting Ting. Today's guest is Josie McKee. Josie is a badass climber, and she has a booming business where she provides mindset coaching. I first met Josie in 2009. She was already a strong climber and she climbed boldly. Back then, she often captured the moments with her DSLR wherever she traveled. Her images were expressive. I enjoyed following her journeys through her lens. Josie has spent years in Yosemite. She worked for YOSAR, sent gnarly routes, and went fast on big walls. I started to learn about her stories, not only from her personal social accounts, but mainstream climbing media. I knew in the past she guided some, and I remember she took her rock guide course with scholarship. I thought she might become a full-time guide, but then she surprised me again. Right now she lives in Lander, Wyoming, and has her own business called The Mind Athlete. She coaches people to harness stress and turn it into something beautiful for their own climbing. I think this job is perfect for her given her climbing reputation. But how did it all come together for her? And what exactly does she do? I invited her to be on this podcast to satisfy my curiosity and to collect insights on alternative professions complementary to guiding. This interview was also quite special because I haven't chatted with her in the same room since more than a decade ago. Josie is doing amazing things, and I'm happy to share it with you all. Hi Josie, how are you?
I'm good.
Yeah, welcome back to Vegas. You must have been in and out Vegas for a while.
It's been a long time since I've been here, though. It's fun to be here.
Is it? Oh, when was the last time you were here?
Gosh, I think it might have been like 10 years ago.
10 years ago?
Last time I climbed here, yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you do here? What have you been doing, I think?
We've been going up on some big multi-pitch routes, just trying to explore some new things, try a little bit harder pitches. We went up on the Rainbow Wall and did the Rainbow Country variation.
Rainbow Country? I don't even know about it.
It's like a few pitch variation of the
see.
regular route on the Rainbow Wall. But the crux pitch was a little wet and there was some choss up there, so we wound up not doing the whole thing. But it was fun. And then we went up in the Black Velvet Canyon yesterday and went up on the Jetstream Wall one day.
Oh yeah, Jetstream Wall is good.
It's really nice up there. We did Cold Front, which is a really neat route. Like every pitch, well, the first pitch is a little bushy, but then the rest of the pitches are like really fun, different, very climbing, interesting stuff.
I only know like drifting, so...
Oh, that looks like a cool route too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm like glad that you came to Vegas because I've been wanting to interview you for a while. I just like, but I'm not very good at Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
The software is fine, but I just found that it doesn't have the touch. So it's great that you came to Vegas. I have a chance to talk face in face.
Yeah, it's fun to see you too. But yeah, these conversations in person are always better for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that we saw each other briefly in 2012. I don't even remember that because...
I think so. I came through Vegas. I can't even remember what I was doing here, but I remember seeing you guys, and I vaguely remember the house that you were living in that time. So.
Okay. Yeah, because at that time there's a lot of dirtbag climbers crashed, so I might just blank that all out, And but then because all my memory can trace back to even way back, like the first time I met you, and then I remember the common friends before I met you in person. It's just like, yeah, Josie, she's so hardcore. Like your nickname was hardcore, So I
hated that nickname
is it really,
so much.
I really want to know why do people give you this nickname being like hardcore.
I don't know. I think it was just because I was always excited to go do some big
Scary
routes
stuff.
and like maybe get scared a little bit. And I don't know. I was just always psyched to go for it and try hard. I think that was the thing. Is probably what that came from. It's just like trying hard.
But I think that's a good quality.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I guess people are just not very creative to come out with like a better nickname.
Yeah, I don't know why I don't like the nickname. It just feels like, I don't know. It felt like putting a label on me that I didn't necessarily identify with.
So you don't consider yourself hardcore, right?
I mean, it's maybe what the thing is about it is that it's all on a spectrum, right? Like maybe I'm hardcore compared to some people, but really I'm not that hardcore, like in the scheme of things compared to like the crazy stuff that people are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. Like, I used to live in a van. People just say, wow, that's... And now just like, everybody lives in the van.
Totally.
It's not like I'm like that special and stuff. So...
Yeah.
But definitely, like, to me, I was just like, at that time, I was like pretty impressed by this, and I overheard like all this brave, like taking huge whippers, and which I think back then when I met you, I was relatively new, so I was just like Josie, and so I was really inspired, and I actually heard one of the podcasts you were interviewed, you say, I don't know if people say that being inspired by me. How do you feel? I mean, nowadays must be a lot of people say that you inspire them for various reasons.
I think I don't know. There's like a side to being an inspiration to people. I'm like, I don't want people looking at me and thinking that I'm like necessarily making good decisions or doing things that people should follow in my footsteps. But, if I can't, like we talked about with that nickname, it's like getting out, trying hard, being excited about stuff and being willing to take risks and get uncomfortable, push outside of your comfort zone. I think if I can inspire people to do that, but not necessarily like follow the footsteps of some of the maybe stupider things that I've done.
Okay.
Because I'm not like all this full of wisdom all the time.
Right, but people is gonna see what they want to see.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. So I guess it's just hard to be in a place where like people look up to you and you're like, well, I'd like you to look up to this part, but not this part. But yeah, especially I think what I found is women that are, trying to get into climbing bigger routes, are asking me questions and excited about the things that I do. And that feels good. Like, I like to be an inspiration for that because there needs to be more women that are excited about that kind of stuff, I think.
Great. Yeah. So, so let me put like this conversation into like perspective. I mean, I'm just too excited to see you. So I'm like throwing out a lot of random questions.
That's right.
And, so this podcast for me is more like talking about career. And I know that traditionally, you have done a little bit of the traditionally defined guiding work. And then, but you actually have quite a lot of pivot in your career. You work in YOSAR for quite many years. And then now you are in Lander and starting your own, you've been doing your own business, like the mindset coaching. So, and so I was just like, wow, it could be inspiring for some people who just like, okay, guiding is fun, but what if at some point I also want to pivot? And so it's kind of like nice to hear like your experience and all that. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe it just makes sense to kind of start at the beginning of how I began in the rock climbing industry as a career. And
for sure. Yeah.
Kind of up till now. So I think actually the very beginning was me working at a climbing gym and teaching kids how to rock climb.
You were in a climbing team, right?
I was, when I was like 15, 16, and then started coaching the youth climbing team and was also doing like birthday parties and, after school, like kids belay kind of stuff. So that was like my first job in the climbing industry, was doing that. And I liked it. I liked teaching kids how to climb. And so when I transitioned to more outdoor stuff, I was working for an outdoor education company called Naturalists at Large, taking kids climbing out in Joshua Tree, in the Pinnacles in California. And from there, I developed more of the outdoor guiding skills. I did my SPI and then started working for Knowles as well. And Knowles, I think, is where I like really developed the skill set of, and talking about like going adventure climbing with students it's a little bit different than traditional guiding.
It's very different.
On-sighting in the mountains, even doing like maybe first ascents with students out in the Wind River Range.
It's like, actually fun in its own way, for
yeah.
sure.
So really fun, but it's like those courses are taxing on the body. They take your time because most of them are like a month long.
Yeah.
So they take your time away from being able to do your own stuff with climbing. And so I kind of started transitioning out of that, where I was like, well, I like teaching people still, but I don't really have the time, and I have more personal objectives and want to be able to train and all of these things. So I haven't been doing as much of the like long courses for a number of years. But that skill set that I had, and teaching, for multi-pitch courses, teaching self-rescue stuff, was a really good skill set to take into working for Yosemite Search and Rescue.
I see. So YOSAR is after Knowles?
Yeah, for the most part. I did a few more Knowles courses after working at YOSAR. But both the Knowles season and the YOSAR season are summer for the most part. And so that kind of
you kind of
really
have to
separate.
Choose,
you kind of had to choose from it. And so I worked for Yosemite Search and Rescue for 3 years, and then was also living in Yosemite for a number of years before and after that. Probably about 8 years in that area total.
Wow.
And
that's a lot of time.
Yeah.
No wonder.
I think that's probably like the window of time that I hadn't seen you, right? Like it was from, I think it was 2013 to 15, and then I moved away from there in 2020, so.
But I heard a lot of stories about you. All this like 7 days, 7 big wall, and speed ascent, and all that. It's a little bit hard for me to imagine that you certainly have the drive. Yeah, so...
Yeah, so it was, living there, being there was so inspirational. It was like, this is the stuff that I wanted to do. This is how I can push myself in so many different ways. And yeah, I got into doing these things, these big walls quickly. That was like the thing for a little bit, because you got to climb so much in one day.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely can understand the drive or the motivation people free solo. I can't make myself do it, but imagine you don't have to deal with gear. You can cover a lot of ground. Yeah,
and then those kind of like speed climbing on El Cap, you're like, I think the skills of climbing in the mountains and doing some stuff free soloing, but also some harder pitches of climbing, it all ties together into being able to make decisions on the move of like, okay, this is a place where I like shouldn't be falling. Okay, this is a place where I need gear. This is a place where I'm going to aid climb a little bit because the moves are too hard and I'm not going to move through them efficiently. And so transitions between all of this different stuff. But I think the kind of dark side of it is that it is dangerous. And with putting myself in those dangerous situations and always trying to do like the next biggest, hardest thing. Like almost every time I went rock climbing, it was like, okay, what's next? What's harder? Can I do it faster? On top of working for search and rescue and like responding to climber accidents, began to just put me in a hyper stressed mindset pretty much constantly.
Yeah, I can't quite imagine how much mental. You're like, okay, summer, right? You're dealing with injuries, rescues, and then maybe spring and fall, you're doing your big.
Yeah, and really, like, the YOSAR season was from, like, the end of April to end of October.
Okay.
And so we were doing rescues in that whole time, climbing big things that whole time.
Whew.
And
I'm tired
fun.
just hearing about it. I mean, why is it so fun? Like, I mean, what were you thinking, like, when you think that was, like, the thing that you like to do?
I mean, a few people that I was on the team with have said this, like, those were the best years of my life. And in some ways, I totally agree with it. Like, it was living a dream life, being able to live in Yosemite and climb almost as much as you want, getting to learn all of these different rescue skills, from the high angle rescue, swiftwater rescue, hiking around everywhere in the park to do searches or to, like, go out and carry people out, getting to fly in a helicopter on rescues, like, all this cool stuff that was, you're doing a job that's helping people. And so you feel good about the work that you're doing, but you're also like, this is amazing. Like, I get to do this. Like, I get to go in a helicopter, or I get to, like, go climbing for work to get up and rescue someone. Like someone that got their rope stuck on Royal Arches rappelling. You're like, okay, we're just going to go climb up and get them. That kind of thing. So it was like, it was a dream for a while. It was amazing.
For sure, yeah.
But lots of, like, a high stress work and play environment all the time. And so...
It's like Las Vegas.
Totally.
You win big, you lose big. Not business, but anyway.
Yeah.
So yes, I can see it's exciting, and then you learn a lot. Feeling helping people, that's good feeling.
Yeah.
And the dark side, the stress, and then at some point you feel like, are you still into doing that type of thing, or you are, like, taking a break? And
yeah, so I think it was toward the end of my time working in Yosemite that I think I had just put myself in stress too much, and I didn't want to go rock climbing. I, like, kept making myself go, but I realized that I had this underlying sense of dread to go rock climbing ever. Like, it just didn't sound fun anymore. I was like, oh, this is this thing that I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I've wrapped my whole identity up in being a climber and being, like, a fast big wall climber, and I need to be doing hardcore things. Like, it was, I don't know that I, like, said that consciously, but, like, that was my identity, and so I kept doing it.
Like, people calling you hardcore kind of, like, make a little, like, thing in your heart that you're like, oh, and did you think that you kind of unconscious think that you need to live out to people's expectation?
I think so, and especially at that point where you're just surrounded by people doing amazing, inspiring stuff all the time, and knowing that I was capable of doing those things also was like, okay, so I have to keep doing this. But I didn't want to. Like, it didn't sound fun. I was, like, scared all the time, or just stressed about it. I would have fun when I was actually rock climbing, but anytime I was thinking about rock climbing, I was stressed.
Oh.
And so it was like preparing for a day of going climbing. Or what I found was the worst part for me for a little while was when I was on belay ledges, just like belaying my climbing partner. I'd be, like, sitting there stressing about, like, are we going to get to the top in time? Like, what's the descent going to be like? Like, how's this next pitch going to be? Is it going to be scary? Like, all of the negative thoughts were going through my head.
So basically, when you were climbing, at that moment you're fine. But then once you can stop and think, you kind of like,
just like anxiety in my head.
Wow. But obviously right now you're still climbing. You are in Vegas climbing. So I'm like, how did you overcome this thing?
So I realized I needed to make a change, because I still knew that I loved climbing, but there was something wrong. It was like a relationship that had gotten toxic, and I, like, I needed relationship therapy for my rock climbing.
Yeah.
And so I actually...
Is there such a thing, though? I mean, it could be a very interesting thing to explore because I'm always like worried that if I guide, at some point I don't want to go for personal climbing. It's not as stressful, I think. Yours is very high stress. But it's kind of nice to hear your experience. Yeah, go on. Sorry to.
Well, it's funny because we're on a podcast, so this is like how I found out about it. Also, was I was listening to a podcast with this woman, Chris Heilman, who is a mindset coach, and she said all these things that I was like, oh my gosh, I need to like talk to her, like find out more from her. And so I looked her up online, and she does mindset coaching for. She's a sports psychologist. She's a PhD in sports psychology. And she works with a bunch of different adventure athletes. Like, she's a runner, skier, climber a little bit. And so I worked with her for maybe like off and on for like a year, getting some coaching on my mindset. And one of the things that like changed everything for me that she said to me, it was like super simple. But she asked what a sustainable, first she asked like, what's the most fun type of climbing that I could be doing? And at the time I was like, man, limestone sport climbing sounds like the most fun. It's like the most playful.
It is pretty
like,
fun.
like low stress. The movement is fun. You've got bolts, so you're like mostly pretty safe. And so that's what I answered her. And then the next question was, okay, so what's a sustainable balance of like that just like type 1 fun type of rock climbing, limestone climbing.
Okay.
And like the other big objectives that I still had to like big Yosemite type objectives. And I don't remember what percentage I said to her, but it was probably like, oh, I should probably be doing like type 1 fun like 70-80% of the time, and this other stuff like 20-30% of the time. But at the time, it was totally reversed. I was like doing these big, hard, scary things like 80% of the time I was going rock climbing. And when I answered that question, I was like, oh, duh. Like, I'm overwhelming myself by making climbing always this stressful thing. And so then I moved to Lander, Wyoming and became a sport climber. I mean, it wasn't like that.
Okay, long story short.
But that was the shift in my relationship to rock climbing, was realizing that this is the thing that makes it really fun. And I need to feed that thing again. I need to go back, like, kind of to the beginning of what it's like to just be a kid playing on the rock again, you know, and find the joy in it again. And so I did that more. I just, like, consciously made that shift of going climbing with intention of making my relationship to climbing better again, making it fun again.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about that. I mean, with the relationship with my husband, I don't want to say that I need to work the relationship, but certainly need to communicate, right? So the same thing as any relationship is whichever is very important to your life. So climbing is the same.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's probably not as important as the person you're married to. But
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is important to me, and it really has shaped my whole life. And I think what I've done with climbing has made me a better person. Like, it's going through that process of managing stress and realizing what I needed to do to, like, in the big picture of how I approach rock climbing, by going and doing the fun stuff more, but still going and doing the big goals sometimes, I think is a good way to approach like any kind of goals. Like, you have to have a foundation of this, what you value in the activity, what you enjoy about it, and then you can start working at the things that are harder in it and like push your comfort zone from that place of, I know why I love this thing, why I'm doing this thing.
Definitely, right. While like most people, when they talk about a climbing experience, they like to talk about their epics. But I don't think everybody want to have epic every single day.
No,
right?
You would wind up like me, like hating going rock climbing. But then the other part of it is like in the moment managing stress. So like when you're up above your protection and like you have to pull a hard move and like, this is a scary fall. Like that moment of making the decision to commit to trusting yourself in the movement and calming yourself down so that you're not like operating from this fully stressed state, but you can focus on the climbing movement. That also translates to everything else that we do in life. Being able to do stuff deliberately with intention and calming our nervous system down. And I love that aspect of it.
Definitely. I mean, it's nice to hear you elaborate that, because you know what, like, so for people like who say interview Alex Honnold, right? So he just like, oh, no big deal, whatever, right? But then it's inspiring in a way, but it's not very useful,
right?
And so I always imagine, you know, as you doing all the scary thing, you're willing to push hard and take big whippers. I was just like, as if it's easy. I know it's not. So it's kind of nice for you to tell me that, look, think about this. There's a way to cope, so you know when to go, when not to, and stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it's like learning to trust yourself, learning to calm yourself down, like all of these things. And I think I guess going into climbing in lander or limestone sport climbing, like you get better at taking falls, but you also get like, I got stronger. I started pushing myself physically more because it was safer. And so now I have a better perspective of like what I'm actually capable of.
Interesting. Yes.
And so I feel like I can try harder on trad routes now too. So yeah, I don't know. That's the progression of, I guess, where I'm at now. And we kind of got off track because we were talking about career, but
it's fine. It's fun. Yeah.
But yeah, so I moved to Lander during the pandemic because it was.
So that's so when was the last year you worked in Yosemite?
I was working there until the summer or fall of 2015.
Okay.
And
what's this 5 years like?
Yeah. I was living after I stopped working on YOSAR, I moved to Mariposa, which is just outside of the valley.
Yes.
So that I could still be there and climb. And in that window of time, I was, climbing in Yosemite a lot, working on the mindset stuff a lot, trying to
so like at that time working
working on my own headspace.
Yeah.
I didn't move directly to Lander to go sport climbing a bunch, but I was doing more single pitch stuff in Yosemite. I was going on climbing trips. I was doing a combo of things. Like I went to Lander and did some climbing trips there, which that's another topic as well. But I was also doing some expeditions. Like I went to India, Nepal, Patagonia. So I was kind of mixing it up. Like I was still
know that you went to Patagonia, but then I lost track of the Himalayas. Yeah.
So I was mixing it up, and I was still doing these big things in there. But yeah, I think so. The other kind of career piece to it was the background of the technical skills that got me to Yosemite to work on the search and rescue team. But I really fell in love with doing patient care there. And I got my EMT.
Yes.
And so I came back to Knowles to teach wilderness medicine courses.
Instead of teaching rock climbing.
Yeah. And that was a more sustainable way to still be involved in the outdoor community. Still teaching people skills that are so useful. So I was teaching a lot of wilderness first responders. I did some wilderness EMT courses also. And that's why I was going to Lander, was to teach the wilderness EMT courses.
So they are, is still their headquarters? Is that the same? Okay.
Yeah. And they have there's a wilderness medicine campus built just outside of Lander called the Weiss campus. So it's a really nice place to teach. And that allowed me to like still be involved, but not like outside doing hard things with people. Like
all the time.
Rock climbing was that. And so I could separate myself and like, okay, I'm going to climb for myself, but still be involved in teaching and working with people in the wilderness medicine aspect. And so that was a fun, like, go to Lander, go sport climbing, teach an EMT course, and then like go on an expedition, climb in Yosemite.
So you gradually trying to find your balance, and then going toward is happy. Okay,
exactly.
And actually, I remember. So I think at some point you might be flirting with the idea of guiding, right? Because I've seen you on this women's rock guide course roster. Yeah. Did you after all take that course?
Yeah, I did. So the AMJ did. They've been doing them for a few years now, but I think I was on the first one that they did.
Oh, okay.
The women's rock guide course. And I think I'm trying to remember my thought process exactly when I took that course. Because I wasn't really guiding at the time, but what I was doing was teaching a bunch of skill clinics, like at the Women's Climbing Festival I did. I worked for my friend's company in the Eastern Sierra. She was called Whitney Base Camp. Now I'm trying to remember. Fifth class climbing is what she's called now.
I know fifth class because Miranda Oakley also.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I did a few courses for her. I was teaching self-rescue because that was the thing that I really felt like a skill set that I felt like I had like a specific niche and ability to teach those skills. So I love teaching those. So I taught a few of those for her, as well as at festivals. And then I was getting into teaching some of this mindset stuff. And taking, like, going out, teaching some of the mindsets work that I had done, as well as, like, doing some falling practice and that kind of stuff. And so I think that was the main reason that I took the rock guide course, was so I could, keep progressing my skill set, so I could work with people outside and do skill classes, because that's what I really loved doing, rather than like taking people out and guiding like in the traditional sense. But like, let's give these people, especially the mindset and rescue skills, where they're like, okay, you're going to use this stuff as you develop as a rock climber, as you start going and doing bigger things. And because I had my own experience with it, both with SAR and with, personal incidents that had happened. I was like, it's so useful to be able to have these skills.
Definitely. So then what I hear is you are more like an educator at heart.
Definitely. Yeah. And so, actually I was in, that's funny now thinking back to it, because it's been a few years, but I was in the process of developing an education curriculum for Flash Foxy. And we were going to start doing all these education courses, and that was when I took the rock guide course, was right before that, because it was going to play into this whole new set of education programming with Flash Foxy.
And then what happened to that?
The pandemic happened to that.
Pandemic just ruined everything.
Yeah, we had like our first spring lineup of schedules, the spring of 2020.
Spring 2020. Yeah, I remember spring 2020.
And so I think, like a lot of people, the pandemic sort of just spun me on my head in terms of what I was doing with my career. So that got put on the back burner. I decided to move to Lander because it was a good place for me to be during the pandemic. Because at that point I had been in and out of Yosemite, in and out of living in Mariposa, and then going on these expeditions, then was traveling to do these courses, and was like mostly living in my van, which didn't work in the spring of 2020. Like, there was nowhere to be. And so I had some good friends that own the guide service actually in Lander, Wyoming, Wind River Climbing Guides. And they were like, yeah, come to Lander. Like, it's not as locked down as, because it's a small town. Like, it's not
just
as
Wyoming people don't care.
Wyoming people in general don't care. But I was in California at the time, and everything was shut down. Like, you couldn't even, like...
Yeah, California, I remember, it was bad.
Yeah. So it was weird being in that transition, just like in lockdown for a little bit in California, and then like, okay, we don't know how long this is going to last.
Yeah, nobody
But I
knew.
need to like figure out something to just do if we're going to continue to live in this pandemic world. And so they had some guiding work up there. So I did do a little bit of guiding that summer. And I wound up getting it was sort of unrelated to the pandemic, but getting a job with the Central Wyoming Climbers Alliance as the executive director and International Climbers Festival director, which we didn't know if we were going to have an International Climbers Festival ever again when I took that job, but it was an interesting way to just get involved with the climbing community there in Wyoming, in Lander. And so help put on the festival with them, as well as we do a bunch of grant writing to work on the hardware, the trails, like maintain the climbing areas there, and then fundraising for youth climbing programming as well. So I had my hand in a lot of different buckets with that job. And so I did that for a couple years while I sport climbed and went out in the mountains a little bit, as well as, so I wasn't doing these like courses with like big groups of people anymore. The events had been shut down. But I still wanted to work with people and teach some of the things that I was teaching. So I started doing some online mindset kind of training programs, which was a really fun way to like keep teaching people. And you know, Zoom's not quite the same as doing it in person, but I realized that it was something that I could do. And so now in the last 6 months, I've transitioned into that pretty much full time. I quit my job with the Central Wyoming Climbers Alliance and am now doing mindset coaching virtually with people.
So you switched to full time. I know that you like mindset coaching. Is that also you're reaching this point that you have increasing clients, so it's like sustainable?
Yeah, and it was like seeing that it was possible and realizing that, oh yeah, like from a distance, working virtually, I can work with a lot of different people. Like it doesn't have to be here in Lander. It doesn't have to be at these specific events, because at the beginning of it, the events weren't happening at all. But I could still do it. And then, yeah, I started growing more clients and developing a specific way of kind of coaching this mindset stuff and having more and more fun with it and learning. Like, I took a number of coaching courses, some neuroscience training, and just like read all the books that I could on sports psychology. And there's a handful of climbing specific sports psychology books. I mean, most people are familiar with the Rock Warrior's Way,
okay,
but like that kind of thing. And so just like diving into learning the stuff and getting really excited about it. Like, it was the stuff that worked for me, and slowly as I taught it to more and more people, it was like, okay, these are the things that are working for everyone else. So
then kind of made me interested. So, well, you say you listened to this podcast and then you needed a little help. So you contacted this mindset coach. So did you model your thing after your coach, or you use it as a springboard to develop? I don't know. How did that all happen? How do you design your thing? Is there some sort of a training or certificate or whatever? All this random.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really any specific training. Like, there's a bunch of different things that I did to train myself, but like mindset coaching for climbing is sort of, it's a small niche industry.
So you have a lot of ways. So you have to experiment, be creative, and then potentially learn from the jar and modify it.
Yeah, definitely. But I use some of the stuff that Chris did, and realizing, so Chris Heilman, the mindset coach that I was working with, like she was working with a broad spectrum of different athletes.
Yeah, you said adventure athlete.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I realized that I could take some of the stuff that, like some of the stuff that she was doing, as well as, what other people are doing, and dial it in specifically for rock climbers. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've found recently is that having, like, rock climbers like to follow training plans. Like, not everybody does, but it's like a thing that it's like, it's easy to go on a prescripted, I'm going to go to the gym, do these
6
exercises.
6-week bouldering training plan. Yeah,
exactly. And
so you have something like that too? 6
yes.
Well,
well, what I do right now is my like kind of intro mindset programming is, it's 4 phone call, like Zoom sessions, or it could be in person if they happen to be in Lander or wherever I am, over the course of 2 months. And then I design for them how they can fit in the mindset work, some exercises within their training programming.
That's very interesting. But I still can't quite comprehend. Can we do a little case study?
Yeah.
So, for example, say, I say I want to hire you.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have what would you say? I just like, I don't know. I know the climbing is a lot about mental. Mm-hmm. So I certainly sometimes afraid of falling. Mm-hmm. I don't want to fall on like tiny little gear. And I want to be doing long route and all that. So I say, hey, Josie, can you help me?
Yeah.
And then what would you say to me?
So I'll usually start, like the first session, I'll start off and just like dig a little deeper into, what are the thoughts that are going on in your mind, the emotions that you're experiencing. Like, is it fear just with going above these small pieces? Are there other elements to it? If it's like specifically this fear of falling thing, then we're going to incorporate falling practice in. Sometimes people are dealing with like a mix of things. And so what I found is interesting, and this is how I frame it to people, is that I think there's kind of 3 buckets that we could put stress into with rock climbing. So there's fear of physical injury. So like falling and like breaking your ankles or whatever. Right?
Yeah, that's scary. Yes.
That's scary. And that causes stress. There's performance anxiety.
Oh yeah, I have that all the time.
You get like, especially if you're like getting on your project.
I can't do that V2 I used to outside this thing. Yeah.
And within that, it's like, your fear of judgment from others, but also your expectations of yourself. And it's this very like emotional and kind of thought process. Like, you have internal dialogue around that kind of thing, right? Like the voices that say these things to you about like self-doubt and
yes,
you should be able to do this, that kind of thing. And then the third is this kind of fear of being uncomfortable. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't recognize in themselves.
Yeah, because I was just like, what
does that mean?
Yeah, right?
And so one example that I like about this is, I've done a lot of alpine climbing. And
sometimes it's not comfortable.
It's not comfortable, right?
Actually, a lot of time.
But we're making constant decisions in alpine climbing of risk, of like this fear of falling and getting injured. But there's also the like time pressure so that we don't get stuck out in the dark, in the cold.
The storm coming.
Whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's like, a lot of times there's 2 elements to that with a storm, right? There's a physical danger of like freezing to death or getting struck by lightning. But there's also the like, oh, it's probably not going to kill us. It's probably not actually going to hurt us, but it's going to suck. Like,
then I will have a story to tell.
Yeah. So that's like the alpine climbing, like the fear of discomfort. Happens in sport climbing too. People don't like the feeling of being pumped or like the feeling of trying hard necessarily. Like,
No wonder a lot of people say trying hard is a skill.
It is. And so that it's being uncomfortable is kind of this bucket that I've put things in. And it's like, okay, are you actually afraid?
Is that a kitchen sink bucket that you just put everything else in?
Maybe.
Okay.
But I think that...
But it's a good category.
It helps people to differentiate of what they're... So I start people with like trying to build awareness of like, okay, what are the thoughts that are going through your mind? And then what are the feelings that you feel in your body, like in relation to like getting afraid or being uncomfortable? Like, what is that
to your body? You mean some like biological signs, like sweating and like shaking?
Or like do you get a nervous stomach, like your heart racing? Because
so trying to make connection with the questions and the bio
science, totally, yeah.
就也 tie into your EMT almost training.
Yeah, I mean, it does a little bit because I've gotten, like I said, I took a neuroscience for coaching course and I've like geeked out on a lot of the research on like what's actually going on specifically with our stress responses but just in general, like what thoughts and emotions are and, you know, what's going on in our brains with those kind of things. And it's really interesting to see that the stress response is a physiological response to something that's challenging to us. And it could be any one of those things. It could be a social challenge, like this performance pressure that we put on ourselves. It could be physically trying hard, like on a, you know, V whatever, like hard boulder move. Or it could be preventing ourselves from falling and getting injured. Those are stressors that give us this physiological response that actually it's there. The sympathetic nervous system response, the fight or flight, a lot of people hear that term, makes us stronger so that we can deal with these challenges better. Then the biomarkers within that are, it increases your heart rate, increases your respiration rate so that you can pump oxygenated blood to your big muscles so that you can try harder, so you can fight or run away from this challenge, right? And so it's actually a good thing.
Yes.
To an extent.
Okay. Well, you take a lot of an analytical practice to yourself. Gee, when I'm climbing, can I even like analyze it?
Well, I mean, we got off track from your case study, right?
Yes. Right. So, so say you have to see maybe a quick interview of your new intake.
And I'll give like a little bit of education on this, like what this kind of stress response is. And then your training assignments are, you know, as part of your like mental training program is to go out. Like, so you're talking about stress above your gear, right? Like you're afraid of small gear because you don't trust it necessarily. Maybe.
Yeah, because you know Red Rock, the rock quality is not
right.
Like Yosemite.
Yeah, right. In sandstone around here for sure.
Right, like RPs, right, yeah.
And so that fear is mostly around like a physical injury type fear. And so identifying like what's going on with your, like what are the actual thoughts? What are the emotions that you experience? Going out and doing some of these things that gradually expose you to that fear. But where do you experience that fear? Like go out and try to find like, okay, how far above a piece of gear, a small piece of gear, can you get and still feel calm? Like, where is that threshold for you? And when you can recognize what switches between, like, being able to perform under stress and then, like, not anymore, that'll give you an ability to start working on managing that fear. Because you notice, like, oh, this is when I get sweaty palms. This is when my brain starts saying, like, you're not strong enough for this move, or you're piece is going to fail, like all of these like internal dialogue thoughts, and then kind of dialing it back from there so that you can make decisions more rationally and comfortably. And then, so within that, like you're noticing, recognizing your thoughts and emotions. And then the other element will be starting to trust your gear more by either aid climbing, taking small falls, but like progressively larger falls on that gear in a setting that is, say, like we've managed the risk somehow by like putting in a really good piece below that. And so you're like, you're not gonna get injured, but you're gonna expose yourself to stress. And one of the things that I think is really great is this concept of stress acclimatization. So it's just like high altitude acclimatization, where you're like, I'm gonna expose myself to a little bit of stress, but come back to calm. Okay. And gradually, as you expose yourself to stress and can make decisions and find success under stress, you'll be able to go higher into stress. Like, get stressed, come back to calm, like function, make good decisions in a stressful situation, and go a little bit more stress, and still be able to come back and center yourself and become calm again.
So it seems like it's similar to, say, the physical conditioning. You like overload and you rest, right? And then you overload and then rest, and eventually your threshold is higher, or something like they say, desensitizing, or
yeah. But I think what a lot of people will do is they'll be like, "Oh, you just need to go take some falls." And so you go and like you get stressed, you take a fall under stress, and you're like, it's still stressful to fall.
It is. So I mean, that's why a lot of time in the past, I hate people just like, oh, how can I climb better? They just say, oh, just go climbing. You climb a lot and go climbing. I was just like, duh.
Yeah. Which is like, to an extent,
definitely,
climbing more is what most people need to do.
True.
But at a certain point, doing that with intention is going to serve you a lot better.
Yeah.
Where there's specific weaknesses that we have. And just like with physical training, you're like, for me, I use this as an example, is after climbing all these years on big walls, like my weakness is power. Like I don't boulder very much. I don't actually do hard moves that much. I have great endurance. So when I do my gym training sessions, I like to focus a lot more on power and hard moves so I can work on that weakness. And same thing with mindset stuff. Like if you're somebody who, like, your weakness is falling, being afraid of falling, then we're going to work on that. If your weakness is red pointing and like the anticipation, anxiety you get over, am I going to send this go? And we work more on that kind of thing.
So another question I have is, most people, just like you said, most people understand the fear of falling or the performance anxiety, right? But how do people identify that it's actually, maybe it's more of a mental aspect? Just like, sometimes you say, I want to work, strengthen my weaknesses, right? And keep my strengths, say. But then most people, like a lot of newer climbers, they're just like, oh, I just don't have the finger strength. So they default that, oh, I'm not strong enough, but they are not thinking that it's actually probably something else. So they might not even just think that they need coaching or help. So what would you say for people to even, like, before they identify? Because I think people find you just like, they already identify that, oh, maybe I should work a little bit on my mind. So then they go to you. But a lot of people think they are just not strong enough.
Right.
Right? I need fingerboard. Right? So,
well, I think that everyone could probably benefit from some mindset coaching. Because, and I think that's what's so cool about rock climbing, is it is such a mental sport.
It is.
And it's like all encompassing. Like you need to have technical skills, you need to have physical fitness and strength, and you need to have a strong mind to be able to focus and to be able to perform under stress, because it's inherently stressful.
Right.
Like, maybe there's a few people like Alex Honnold out there that just aren't afraid of falling, aren't
but
afraid
his
of
brain
heights.
is kind of seem different.
Right.
So, yeah.
But innately, humans have a fear of falling, of exposure at heights. And innately, humans have this performance, like this need for social, like to fit in somewhere in the social hierarchy, right? Like, we want to be seen and recognized and appreciated by the members of our community. And so those two things we're going to feel stress over. And I think, so the short answer is everyone. But I think the longer answer to it is it's about learning to manage your attention. And if you find that, like, your focus on climbing movement, right? Like, to be able to perform your best as a rock climber, all of your energy, all of your attention is focused on the climbing movement. And if you find that your mind goes to other things,
like distracted,
you get distracted, then mindset coaching can help with that.
That's a good way to put it.
Focus your attention on the thing, on the task at hand, on what is relevant right now, as opposed to like, oh, what happens if I fall? Like, who's going to judge me? Or like, do I have to send this go? Or like, I'm scared above my bowl. Like, there's just like all these thoughts that enter into our mind and distract us from climbing movement. And so if you find yourself with those kind of thoughts, then you can benefit from training your brain to focus attention on the present moment, on the climbing movement.
Great. Wow. How many mindset coaches are there? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's, like, I know of probably like 5 or 6.
Because I do know that in the industry, they certainly have the so-called warrior's way, whatever, warrior trainer-ish. But and then I know Hazel Finley is doing, I forgot what she called it.
Strong mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't think there's a lot out there. I mean, there's a lot of 6-week bouldering and sport climbing training program, a lot of physical training. Yeah. Because it's very easy to measure. Like, do you also have some benchmark and then like the evaluation, and how do people know that, okay, now I'm like ready for my next step?
This is something that I definitely been working on, trying to like, how do you add weight to mindset training?
Right. People like
those
to
kind of metrics.
Log their ascent, right?
Yeah.
So they like to feel like they are going to some sort of success.
And it's because it's mind work, it's going to be a little bit subjective.
True.
But journaling, reflective stuff is a lot of the work that I work on with the athletes that I work with. And so they can usually see progression. I think it's hard to define it quite as well as you do with physical training.
Definitely.
But the clients that I work with will see results in their climbing where they're like, oh, I'm so much more comfortable doing this. And I just got off a call last week with this one woman that I was working with, that she got back from a trip and she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that falling practice is actually something that is working for my fears. Like, I just didn't realize it. And I asked her, like, what was next after that? Because we had been kind of prepping for this trip. And I was like, okay, so what's next from this, like, after this trip? Like, now that you're home, like, what's the next goal? What do we want to work on now? And she's like, I'm just really excited to continue this falling practice and, like, see where it takes me. Because it actually is something that I see progress in. And so usually as I'm working with people, it's just checking in and, like, okay, where are you seeing progress? Like, what are the things that are working for you? What's not working? Like, how do we kind of add exercises in and keep progressing?
So what do you think about, like, right now your work, the mindset coaching. You even have this calendar of like when you are available to talk and all that. So how do you manage that with your, I don't know what your personal life, what you do now? Maybe still a lot of climbing, and do you think that you find a good balance right now?
Yeah, I think so. I try to plan my schedule so that I can go rock climbing, like personal rock climbing a lot.
So like, what's your like priority in life, like personally?
What is my one priority in life?
Just like, you want, what's your ideal balance? I guess that's what I'm trying to get.
Well, I'm still trying to train for some big objectives in climbing, and so trying to maintain the climbing fitness, which is like kind of a full-time job just to like train and go climbing. And so that's one of my priorities. The other thing is progressing this mindset coaching, which is, I'm working now a lot with individuals, but I've started to do workshops. And so getting some of this information out there to the masses is this other goal. So like doing bigger, like talks, workshops,
like public speaking,
and writing a book is the other thing that I'm working on. And so, continuing to grow to kind of spread this word out there more.
Yeah, it's actually taking quite a while, right? Because it starts with this seed that from you yourself experiencing this and found it very useful. And then you train yourself and then design the courses. And at the very beginning, how did people even find you at the very beginning though?
Social media has been like my marketing tool, basically.
Because I remember like the stories of like say Amazon, whatever. And then at the very beginning, they're just like, all the people buying their books, their family members. Eventually, they have like some random person buy the first book, and they were all excited. I was just wondering how long does that?
Yeah, I think in the beginning it was people that knew me,
right?
And then slowly it's been like, oh, I don't even know who this person is. Like, how did they hear of me? And it's word of mouth or it's Instagram. I don't know how Instagram actually works.
I mean, you change all the time. I think that adjust the algorithms and stuff. Yeah,
exactly. But I've had you probably know Athena Rock Guides out of Joshua Tree.
Yes, I do.
Primarily for women's guide service. Like they do a lot of women's programming.
Yes.
Owned by Kelly Fields, and like all of her staff are women. You should interview her, actually.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I am heading to Joshua Tree maybe early fall. I just like to interview people in person.
Yeah.
It's like the best way for me. Yeah, I should get in contact.
Yeah, well, we can share her contact.
Connect.
But she's done some promotion for me.
Awesome.
And so I think I've gotten a couple people from her programs, and then other clients that have referred me from to their friends, that kind of thing.
So anybody want to invite Josie to, just give a talk, a workshop to introduce her program. Because right now you are still accepting new clients, right?
Yeah. So and especially like the idea of more group stuff. And so like I did a mindset coaching thing for Athena Rock Guides for her guides.
Yes, which was... I was thinking about I teach SBI courses. That could be an interesting little program, but it's a little bit different. This affiliate with AMGA, so it's hard to alter their curriculum and stuff. Yeah, but I think it would be something interesting for guides too.
Yeah, and that's like a slightly different approach to it with guides, because I think.
Yeah, what did you do with them?
Well, so there's kind of two components
coming back
to it, right?
Guide.
Yeah. So there's your own personal mindset management, which with guiding, like you're making so many risk management decisions, and throughout the day as you get more tired, or throughout the week when you've like gone out and done things a bunch, and you're constantly assessing risk of, you know, rock fall, your clients and their capabilities, weather coming in, and you have to manage that for everyone. So I think it's just a higher stress job. Like you have to kind of be on point. So having your own mindset is really good, but then also having some skills to coach other people when they're dealing with stress. And so that's how I did it with the Athena Rock Guides course that I did, was kind of talking them through their own personal stuff.
How about the common stressors that guys have?
Yeah.
Like, what did you find out?
Well, one of the things that we were talking about in that was a couple of their guides had been in some like near miss, like rock fall incidents.
Yeah.
And so starting to like
more like a risk management.
Yeah. And to like, how do you get back into climbing after you've been exposed to something that was scary and dangerous? And you know, kind of like my own stress that I dealt with on search and rescue was like, it was starting to affect my own personal climbing.
Right. So perhaps your guiding stress affect your personal. Yeah, I see.
So that was a big thing that we talked about. And then yeah, how do you coach clients, especially people that are...
People always ask me like, how am I shake? I mean, the common thing is just like, do I need to take some fall practice?
Yeah, and I have a framework for like how to approach falling practice. Like if you have clients that you're working with on a regular basis, of like, okay, so these are some progressive steps to like do an intentional falling practice, rather than be like, okay, we're just gonna go out to the sport crag and like take whippers, which is like,
it's fine, just fall. No,
it can be good, and that can work for some people, but a large enough percentage of the population, if you just put them up there and say like, go take falls, you're actually potentially doing more harm than good, because they're so stressed when they're falling that they're associating falling with stress.
Oh, so what's your framework? Is that a trade secret or like?
No, it's not a trade secret. I mean, I think it's really similar to what a lot of people do, which is, again, kind of going back to building that awareness of like, what is your stress response?
Okay.
And learning to calm that stress response, so that then you can take progressively larger and larger falls from a place of calm, rather than like, okay, I'm stressed, just let go and fall. Okay, that was really scary. Okay, I gotta go do that again. Like, you go up from like first just like dangling on the rope and swinging around, like feeling relaxed hanging there, and then like, okay, your waist is at the bolt. Can you get yourself to and this is really similar to the Rock Warriors way, and I think what a lot of people do, but there's breath, eyes, and body is kind of the three things that I think about with calming yourself before falling. So an inhale and then a slower exhale is something that calms the nervous system down. And so if you do, there's like, I'll do it here and see if you can like hear it. It's like it's like a fast inhale with like 2, and then a really long exhale along with like a little bit of sound, like an audible sigh, is really calming. So it's so that's the breath work that can calm the nervous system down.
2 quick inhale and then with this long slow exhale. Okay.
And then eyes, so like looking at where you're gonna fall, but with a soft focus on more like your peripheral vision, is really calming on the nervous system. And then body, like feeling the body relax and being like in a position of falling, with, you know, like soft knees so that you don't impact hard, like a cat. But also specifically thinking about relaxing in your core, because that can be something that we like hold. We tend to hold tension there, and if you focus on just like kind of releasing your core muscles, it has that repercussion throughout your body. Like it calms your whole body down. So those three things are like the quick, like we'll do this to try to calm our nervous system down. And once you feel relaxed, then taking a fall. So at the bolt, and then you can go up a little higher and do it again. And just doing like a little bit of that each time you do falling practice, rather than like, okay, we're going to go from totally scared of falling to like taking whippers with our feet above the bolt in one session is like maybe realistic for some people, but not necessarily like what you want to do for everyone.
True, because I think for your mindset coaching, so also pretty personalized, right?
Yeah.
Some people just like, oh, I'm just gonna take a couple whippers and I'm done.
Yeah.
That I'm fine.
Yeah.
But some just can't.
Yeah.
So.
And then it's like, so it's, you know, it's whippers, but then it's like, maybe it's falls on small gear, or maybe it's like, taking falls when you're traversing, because that's not something that we do very much of. And so like, that makes you more scared than a vertical fall, because
it's just because it's novel.
Don't know what it's like.
You just don't have that much information.
And so maybe that's what the falling practice looks like, is taking these falls that are not your normal straight up and down falls.
Interesting. Well, next time if my client asks and I have something to say, if they say they need more information, I just send it to you.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Great.
But yeah, it's fun because like I said, climbing is mental and physical. Like working on all elements of it it's going to be useful for most people, and it's really fun for me to help people out with it. Like I love seeing that progress with people where they're like timid, scared, just like generally climbing with a lot of tension to like a lot more relaxed and a lot more fun with their climbing.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. So I think a lot of people who fall in love with climbing, right? They always want to do something with climbing, if ideally, right? So, if I can use the skill set to do jobs, and obviously a lot of people think about guiding, which the traditional sense is just taking people out. And then I think your career shifts are also pretty tied to climbing, right? YOSAR, and then you flow with a little bit technical courses and taking people out. And then now it's your mindset coach. So my question is like, what? I know this question is a little bit hard, but at different phase you might have a different answer. What would you look at climbing now compared to, like, is there any like what's your relationship with climbing?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and it probably have different phases, but I'm just kind of curious. You were in love. You were like, I'm a little bit tired. Now you're probably back in love. I don't know, but you tell me. Yeah,
I think I'm more in love with climbing than I've ever been.
You can review your vow here in Las Vegas.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like I did too, because this trip, I was climbing with a couple of my girlfriends, one of whom I had spent some time about 2 years ago climbing in the Black Canyon, or no, almost 3, because it was 2020, and then on Moonlight Buttress. And she's been a person that we did a little bit of teaching mindset stuff together prior to the pandemic. We worked a couple of clinics at the Women's Climbing Festival together, Becca Dross. And those trips that I did with her, I was struggling with my mindset on those trips. And then coming back a few years later and climbing with her again, she even said she like noticed it, like I've changed. So I like renewed my vows here in Vegas.
Awesome.
But that's someone that has also very intentionally worked on mindset, and we've like talked about this stuff together over the years. For her to have like said that she noticed that progression for me it's kind of nice to have that external validation, but I knew it anyway. Like I said, I'm more in love with it. Like I really genuinely love going rock climbing, and I don't have that same kind of dread that I used to have. Sure, I'll have like some anxiety around it now and then, particularly like the performance related pressure stuff. But I think that it's become this tool that I can explore how I can grow and how I can focus and how I can just like be better at learning new things in general. It's like an easy way for me to go outside of my comfort zone and like try hard things and analyze myself and my own psychology and just get better. So it's like, it's a fun tool to just be getting better at being me, or being human. So I'm just like always curious of what I can do with climbing.
Yeah. Wow. So what kept you not giving up at the lowest moment? Not giving up on climbing, is what I mean.
I think it was just that I knew that somewhere inside of me I loved it, like, because I used to, right? Like from the beginning, there was something about it that very much was like I was drawn to, that I like wanted to do. And so I think what kept me going was curiosity of what that was and how I could find it again. And so that's what I did, really, was like look inside and see, okay, what are my values in climbing? Like, why is climbing so great? And really, like, that component of challenge and pushing my comfort was an element of climbing that I valued. And that shifted my perspective on the stress that I have around it. Choosing to do these challenging things, choosing to step outside of my comfort, because that's something that I actually love about rock climbing. It was just looking at it from a different lens, rather than being like, oh, I have to do this thing. No, I'm choosing to do this thing. And then, like, I love the movement. Like,
I mean, movement is great. Yeah. Yeah, because right now, if say I hire you for real, I would definitely tell you like, right now, full-time guiding here, I certainly from time to time I have two worries. One worry is just like, oh, I'm getting older, and then I'm not climbing as much personally, so I'm like worried about that. And I still have some goals in back of my mind, so maybe I won't be able to accomplish that, right? So that's like one thing, right? Another thing was just like, what if someday that I lose interest in climbing, which is not the end of the world, for sure. But I don't want it to be because guiding, right? I want it to be, if someday that I stop climbing, I want to make sure it's my personal choice, not because I'm just tired, burned out and stuff. So do somebody approach you like something like this?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I've quite heard that before, but it resonates for
because
some of the
we're
thoughts
talking
that
about guiding.
Yeah.
So
I think like what I was just mentioning with my own personal process, I think that it's so important for everyone to recognize what their value is in rock climbing. Like, why is it that you love this activity? And how does it fit in with your personal values in life? Like, overall, what motivates you? What do you enjoy? What do you value in life? And how does that match with rock climbing? And then once you can say those things, how do you keep making climbing fit into those values? Like your choices of when you go personally climbing, or like if you recognize that guiding is starting to encroach on those personal values of climbing, intentionally resetting and restructuring.
Yeah, like restart my computer, fix every crap.
Yeah. Like, clean off the hard drive and start over.
Definitely. That's just reboot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's important to just like keep asking those questions because they'll change too.
Definitely.
But one of the things, I can't remember where I heard this, but goals can change. Oh, this was my coach, my climbing coach.
Okay.
I work with him for physical training. He works with Climb Strong. His name's Alex Bridgewater. He's great.
Oh, I know Alex Bridgewater.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, because I attend one of the, so they have this workshop in one of the gym. And, and you know, Dave and Steve, they knew each other for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's also in a PhD for sports psychology program.
And how's Alex? Because he got injured.
He's good. The injury in the fall.
Okay.
I think he burned his hand.
Yeah.
He's good. Yeah, he's back to it. So,
sorry, I don't.
Random questions.
Right.
Yeah.
So keep going on your physical training. Sorry.
Yeah. So he's my physical training coach, but he's also getting a PhD in sports psychology right now. So we geek out on this mental training stuff together.
Yeah.
So one of the things that he was saying is that our goals in climbing can change, but our values are more constant. And they might change over time, but like what we love about the activity is more constant, and our goals in climbing usually like fit into those values. Or if they do, there's gonna be more power toward those goals if they fit into those values.
So say like people ask me, okay, Ting Ting, like why do you like climbing? And a lot of times it's like, I don't know, I just like it. And I mean, it's a valid answer, but you're saying that you encourage me to like explore even like deeper. I don't have to answer people, but then like it's deeper, then it can help me to recognize like my life paths or choices and stuff.
I think so. And one of the things that I'll do with clients is have them kind of visualize one of their best days climbing, like a time that was just really great. And then what are the elements of that day that made it so great? And how can you take those elements and like try to get those things from climbing on a more regular basis?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, people will talk about, you know, the people that they're with or the places that they're in, or, you know, the element of trying hard. Or maybe it's like a specific route that they really loved climbing on because of the movement. I mean, there's just so many different things about climbing that you can love. But as they start to define those things, I've like seen that kind of aha moment on their faces of like, oh yeah, like that is what I love about rock climbing. I need to keep doing that.
Yeah. I'm so glad you share your story with me. Because I think, I mean, you might not like the nickname hardcore, and I won't call you. I love to just call you Josie, but I think that now that I know very deep about you, but the way that I see you is you're always going out there and trying new things, and I think that's one a constant thing that I've been always seeing. I still remember. When I just met you, you have this DSLR and took a lot of photos. And at some point, you are even selling Joshua Tree calendars to people.
That's right.
You remember?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So you're still taking professional photos?
I mostly take photos with my iPhone.
I mean, it can be professional quality for sure with nowadays iPhone.
I do like to take photos, yeah. I think one of the things I realized about the DSLR and like constantly going around and taking photos was I was always, maybe not always, but oftentimes struggling with like the balance of enjoying the moment and trying to capture the moment. And the photo, like taking the good photo that captured the moment took away from my experience of like enjoying that moment. Like the sunset. Like me watching this gorgeous sunset right now, like there's never going to be a photo that's going to do that feeling justice. And so like sometimes it was fun to try, but also I was like, oh, I'm missing my life trying to document my life.
For sure, because it's two different things. I remember I listened to one of the podcasts from this famous, even I say famous, I forgot his name, but about adventure photography, right? And he just like, well, if it's a photo itself, it's like it's gonna be staged somehow, right? And so he will ask on the expectation that some people might not even want to be documented because it will take the experience away. So it's just like the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a similar thing to that.
I just want to climb.
Yeah.
I don't need to think about this like somebody,
future, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, but I still do, like, and I think that's why, like, the iPhones, the cameras are so nice now, too.
Yes.
You don't have to do a lot. Like, you can pull it out and take a photo real quick and put it away, and it's like, you can still document some things without affecting the experience as much. So I do that a bit, and then I also really enjoy when I'm around other people that are taking photos, so I can have some memories of the moments without having to pull out my own camera.
True.
So I don't know. That's where I'm at with it right now.
Great. So I have best wish for your developing business. I know you're already thriving, but I know that you're trying to make it more well known and stuff. And
thank you.
I'm not gonna ask you about your big climbing goals because I personally like to keep goals for myself. But and I definitely, once you have that accomplished out here, then I'll have an excuse to ask you for maybe another podcast and stuff. And so, how if people want to, and everybody can benefit from the mindset coach. So, what's the best way for them to find you?
So my website, josiemckee.com or mindathletetraining.com. It's the same website.
Okay, Josie McKee.
That's easy.
Okay, .com, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Instagram, it's Josie_McKee_.
Right. Well, I definitely will put it.
Yeah.
All the link on the website.
Yeah. People message me through there a lot. So yeah.
Great. Cool. If I need one, can I have a discount?
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to me, and so we can have an in-person conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a pleasure to catch up.
Looking forward to your future endeavors.
Thanks.
Yeah.